How's it going, everybody? Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio, every Wednesday, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, here on Sports Byline USA Broadcasting Network, streaming live on YouTube, video.f4wonline.com, as well as Twitch, twitch.tv/F4W video. You can check us out live every Wednesday at 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern. And today, we have no guest on the show, which means you get to participate here today. What does that mean? Well, you're going to be sending us your stories, and we're going to be reading them here on the air. We'll also open up the phone lines in the final segment of the show, and we'll get into a lot of different things regarding, as usual, what strange thing happened in your hometown. If, in fact, something strange happened where you lived, and something did, I've had people say that they didn't, and they're wrong. If you look around, if you ask around, you will find that something weird happened in your hometown. So we're looking for those stories, or stories that your grandparents told you. Strange stories you might have heard from a grandparent about this or that. And as noted, they don't have to be paranormal. They can be of any sort. Any strange thing that happened to you, your family, your hometown, let me know. You can send it to me via email, Bryan@AfterDarkRadioShow.com. That is Bryan@AfterDarkRadioShow.com. We're going to read a bunch of those today, as well as talk about all of the news, take your phone calls, and plenty more. Bryan@AfterDarkRadioShow.com. And, of course, as always, you can follow me on Threads, Instagram, and Cameo, if you'd like a cameo, F4W Online. And I am at Bryan Alvarez on both X and Blue Sky. So back in a moment to kick it all off. After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Joe Bryan Alvarez here. After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network, Twitch and YouTube as well. And today, what weird thing happened in your town? I got one. I'm going to talk about that here in just a moment. But if you'd like to send me a story, you can send that to Bryan at AfterDarkRadioshow.com. That is Bryan at AfterDarkRadioshow.com. And we actually got a ton of stories here today. So, very good chance that I won't be able to get to all of them. But, listen carefully. If you send me a story, I guarantee I will read it. Not on this show, but at some point I will read all of the emails that get sent with stories on this show. I've actually got several from a couple of weeks ago that I'm going to read here. So, if you send a legitimate story, I will read it at some point on the show. So feel free to send them along, even if we're, you can send it during the week. You can send it anytime. I'm holding on to all of them, and I will make sure that I get to everything here on the show at one point or another, because there are a lot of you out there, and you got a lot of stories, and I'm not going to let them disappear into the ether. Two quick plugs. We got a new t-shirt, After Dark Radio. You can check that out, f4wonline.com/shirts. That is f4wonline.com/shirts. It's a cool After Dark Radio shirt. And also, if you're not a subscriber, you should check out the subscription area. Last week, we had the Reverend Bill Bean on the show, exorcist and spiritual deliverance minister, known as the Spiritual Warrior. And he is rebooked for June, actually. He's going to come back on in June and talk more. So if you missed that show, if you sign up as a subscriber, you can listen to all past episodes of After Dark Radio, and I'll tell you how to do that later. But first off, what happened in my neck of the woods? Well, a lot. Probably thinking I'm going to tell this Maltby Cemetery story for the 50th time, but in fact, I'm not. What I'm going to tell you about today is actually something that, amazingly, I know very little about, and I probably should look more into it now that I'm doing this show regularly again. But the Bothell Hell House. Now, for those of you that have never been to Bothell, which is virtually all of you, so I live here, it's north of Seattle, and there's a whole bunch, it's the suburbs, and there's a whole bunch of places in very close proximity to each other. There's Bothell, and then, there's... literally, where I live is right on the border of Bothell and Kenmore. There's Bothell, there's Kenmore, there's Woodinville. You go this way, there's Redmond, there's Kirkland. Farther south, there's Bellevue. I mean, it's just... And the funny thing about everything is, when I was a kid growing up, it was like, Redmond and Kirkland, they're the same thing. But they're not. One is on one side of the freeway, one is on the other side. But they're in the exact same place. It's just if you're on this side of the freeway, you're in Kirkland. If you're on that side, you're in Redmond. So anyway, Bothell is weird because what I picture as Bothell is the giant downtown Bothell area. And as you drive north, I mean, to me, you're moving out of Bothell, you're getting into Mill Creek, you're getting into South Everett, etc. But for whatever reason, Bothell really feels like a small town, but it's actually, it's big. It just, I drive so far north and it's I'm still in Bothell. So I think one of the things about the Bothell Hell House is it's so far north, to me, it's not even Bothell. It's way up in Everett, but apparently it's got a Bothell address. And I've never actually been there, but I have investigated this enough. I don't know the exact address. The address might be out there somewhere. I think if you Google Bothell Hell House, one of the suggestions is address, so maybe you can actually find the address. But, if you look online, there are a lot of people that live in Bothell that know about the Bothell Hell House, and they'll give you a general idea of where it's at. But this is from the not world-famous Bothell Reporter, bothell-reporter.com. Paranormal investigators recently published findings regarding a Bothell Hell House that plagued multiple residents over the years. Keith Linder is a Bothell native. He wrote the book, The Bothell Hell House, on Amazon.com. Lived in the house for 4 years before moving out in 2016. He reported various paranormal incidents plagued him and his girlfriend, including floating objects, strange symbols, and spontaneous fires. The book covers a 4-year ordeal with a haunting that took place in the home. It was our very first paranormal experience. Neither me nor my girlfriend at the time, Tina, had ever gone through anything remotely similar. She is now his ex-girlfriend. So he moved into the house, apparently, and he said that he wanted a detail-oriented story, but also not exaggerate the things that he saw. I investigated the land, the house, and whatnot. There was a family who lived there 5 years earlier and saw similar activity. I talked to the wife. She said the house was a living hell. I'm not a religious guy, he said. Never gave rise or thought about demons, ghosts, poltergeists. Having now seen and heard things, it does make you have to revise your inner beliefs. Made me revise my current thinking about life after death. Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures did an investigation. They did an entire episode on the Bothell Hell House and hauntings around Seattle. The initial lack of evidence partially discredited Linder and his claims. He said it was a dark time in his life. He just wanted help to prove something that was real and terrifying part of his life. So anyway, that's the story of the Bothell Hell House, and I don't know if there's been anything new going on in the last several years. I don't know the fate of the house. I'm actually going to, oh, look at this. This person's got the alleged address right here. And supposedly it's on Maltby Road. I thought it was Maltby Road. Okay, I know where that is. So, hey, Shadow in the chat, email me that address, and I might drive by today and at least look at the house, but not go in. And I'll give everybody an update next week. But that's the story of the Bothell Hell House. And there's plenty of stuff. I mean, you know, Seattle, especially downtown Seattle. Theaters allegedly haunted. There's underground Seattle allegedly haunted. Pike Place Market allegedly haunted. So if you're like a fan of alleged hauntings, I got the place for you to visit. And last week, actually, with Bill Bean, he had a lot to say, if you know what I mean. So I didn't really get. I need to talk to other people when we have guests on talking about hauntings. But it does appear that, like, when it comes to these hauntings, there's always like two sorts of them. There's the house that's haunted, where this would be like the Bothell Hell House. Doesn't matter who lives there. They move into the house and bad stuff happens. That's when the house itself was haunted. And then what he was talking about, what he said allegedly happened to him and his family, that would be the case of there's something that is following that particular family. So they leave one house, whatever it was follows them to the next house, follows them to the next place. So these seem to be two completely different things. And I mean, I can't really sit here and tell you that I'm a big believer necessarily in ghosts and such. But, you know, the theory that certain places can be haunted, as in, you know, things happened, and in some way or another, these sounds and such were recorded in the walls or whatever and played back. Like when you hear that, it sounds weird. But I mean, if you think about what like magnetic tape is, it's the same thing. Like you're recording something on a magnetic tape and you're playing it back at a later date. For those of you that are old and know about magnetic tape and 8-tracks and tape players, etc. So, you know, I think that could be an explanation for a haunted house, where no matter who goes there, they have some sort of experience because something has been recorded there and is somehow being played back. As far as like a spirit from beyond the grave haunting and following you around, I like to hear people's stories. I'll just say that. So anyway, let's look at some of the emails here, and we'll do more after the break. And in fact, that is the lead into the break. When we come back, some stories from your neck of the woods, and I'll open up the phone lines in the final segment as well. And I do have at least one news story to read about that kind of plays into this, one of these stories. Back in a moment, After Dark Radio on Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Holy, did I just go down a rabbit hole right there? So, I was reading the chat during the break, and somebody here says, "You're the only reason I've ever heard of Bothell. I used to think it was Bothell." And so, it was funny because when I was a kid, and I am ancient, there was a computer game called Zork. So, if you're probably 50 or older, you may have heard of Zork. And it was a text game. So what it was is it would tell you a sentence, and then you could type something in, and then you kind of like go from there or whatever. I'll give you an example here in a minute. But anyway, the point was, back then there was no internet. So like if you got stuck in the game, you were like screwed. You couldn't like Google, how do I get past, the mailbox or whatever. So they had a book, like Secrets of Zork or whatever, I don't remember. But you had to mail order for it. Dom's sitting here, he's just flabbergasted. You had to write a letter and put like money in the envelope and send it to an address, and then they would send you the book in the mail like weeks later. Anyway, I remember this because I bought this book, and it took forever for the book to arrive. And when it finally did, it turned out it took forever to arrive because they had spelled the city Bothell, Boffell, just like this guy thought. So maybe that's the guy, Michael, that sent me that book all those years ago. But anyway, I went to find out when Zork first came out, and it was like 1978 or something like that. But turns out, Zork, you can literally go play Zork on your browser now. The same game that I played when I was a kid. And for those of you that don't know how these games worked, I'll quickly give you an example. So it opens up and it just says, west of house. You are standing in an open field west of a White House with a boarded front door. There is a small mailbox here. And then there's just a thing waiting for you to type. So you have to like tell it to do something. So I typed in open mailbox. And it says, there is a letter in the mailbox. And then you, open letter. And then you open the letter and it's an advertisement for what's coming up in Zork. And so then, you can write whatever. So I wrote, tear it up. And the thing goes, I don't know the word tear. Those are the games I had to play when I was a kid. So anyway, let's jump into the mailbag here. If you got a story, you can send it to Bryan at AfterDarkRadioshow.com. That is Bryan at AfterDarkRadioshow.com. And as promised, I will get through all of these at some point. But one at a time. And this here is from Richard. He says, when I moved to Pittsburgh, one of my friends told me about this old story. Someone called the Green Man or Charlie No Face, who would walk the trails. No one would walk up to him because it was just a terrifying visage. After his death, folks purported to still see him at times on walks, asking for a cigarette or trying to just talk with them at night. Located in the suburb of South Park, not to be confused with the TV show, the Green Man Tunnel bears the legend of a power company worker who was burned while on the job, thus disfiguring his face and turning his skin into a dark, deep green color. Well, as it turns out, there was a man who fit this description, who in life would do the same thing. He was electrocuted as a child and fell, resulting in his arm, face, and one ear being severely damaged. When you see the picture, it looks like someone used software to obscure it, but it was the result of an accident. And you can go to Wikipedia and Google Raymond Robinson, Green Man, and he was a real person. And he had had a real accident, and he was severely disfigured. And apparently, he went out at night as a result of this. And he would always go for walks. And, people would see him along the road. And apparently even got hit by a car a couple of times walking at night. But, obviously the stories of him still walking the road after his death. Probably urban legends, But he says, I can't speak to the stories of folks seeing him after he passed away. But a really wild situation we had here in the past. I also, Rich said, had a coworker tell me a tale of living on their farm just outside of the city and their family all accepting that they have a skinwalker nearby. At various times when she and others came to visit, They'll report to hear a guest calling them from the field, only to have that person come out from the house from a location would be impossible to have their voice originate from had it been in the field. It was said to start when my coworker's sister went to New Mexico, had a similar encounter, only she acknowledged the voice, and they believed it followed them home. And, we probably will have a guest on at some point talking about skinwalkers. But Native American legend and a lot of those stories from New Mexico. So, if you believe in skinwalkers, that would certainly tie into the story of the sister seeing and or hearing something in New Mexico, and it allegedly following her back to the house. So that is from Rich. I want to thank you very much for that email. We got Dennis here. It says, Philadelphia, we have hundreds of these Toynbee tiles embedded into our street asphalt. There have been documentaries about the possible meanings behind them, who might have been making them, but it is still unclear. And the tiles say Toynbee idea in movie 2001, resurrect dead on planet Jupiter. And this is another one, Toynbee. That's Toynbee, Toynbee tiles. And if you go to Wikipedia, it's a thing. Toynbee plaques, messages of unknown origin, found embedded in asphalt of streets in about 24 major cities in the U.S. and 3 South American cities. Since the 1980s, hundreds of these tiles have been discovered. They're generally about the size of an American license plate, sometimes considerably larger. They contain some variation of the following inscription. Toynbee idea in movie 2001, resurrect dead on planet Jupiter. So, the thing that is bizarre about it is, when I first heard of these, I thought that all of these tiles had like a different message. But in fact, they all have the same message. Some of the more elaborate tiles feature cryptic political statements or exhort readers to create and install similar tiles. Material used for making the tiles initially unknown, but evidence emerged may be primarily made of layers of linoleum and asphalt crack-filling compound. And there have been articles about them since the mid-90s. References appear to have started in the mid-80s. So, it says here in 1983, a man identifying himself as a social worker named James Marasco contacted talk shows and newspapers with his theory of colonizing Jupiter with the dead inhabitants of Earth, claiming to have come across the idea while reading a book by historian Arnold Toynbee. In a conversation with the Philadelphia Inquirer, he discussed how Toynbee's book contained a theory on bringing dead molecules back to life. This was later depicted in the movie 2001. Collar had founded that the Inquirer called a Jupiter colonization organization known as the Minority Association. And then at that point, people started writing more about these Toynbee tiles. So, in 2003, a person called the only James Marasco in the Philadelphia telephone book was told by her wife, that her husband had died in March that year, aged 88. They asked about the tiles, and the widow said her husband, quote, didn't know anything about it. And it was doubted that this person was the tile maker. So it's really a mystery still who first started these tiles and either has continued to make them or, people have just taken on and started making some of their own. But those are the Toynbee tiles. Thank you, Dennis. He's in Philadelphia, and there are hundreds of them there. This person is, this is Anthony. He says, Brian, it's your friendly neighborhood Yeti Pot Pie here to share the tale of Hobbitville, a small village of tiny homes found within a city, within my city of Salt Lake. As a youngster, I used to ditch school with friends and venture beyond the iron gates of Hobbitville to explore inside. I'm not great at telling stories, but here are some excerpts from an article by Catherine Armstrong that best describes the place. If you grew up in Salt Lake City, you might be familiar with the urban legend of Hobbitville. It was supposedly a terrifying neighborhood of small houses inhabited by gnomes, evil creatures, and magical hobbits that would chase you down to kill and eat you if you dared to trespass through their yards. Of course, the legend was perpetuated by high school kids all over the valley. Even kids in other counties would drive to Salt Lake to see if they could find the dangerous hobbit dwellings. Mystical evil of Hobbitville had nothing, or was nothing more than a scary urban legend. But every urban legend does start with a kernel of truth, and there is an actual neighborhood of tiny houses in Sugar House. 1931, Dr. Gregory Allen purchased 8-acre property. For years, animals of all kinds wandered the grounds, including an elephant, reindeer, peacocks, and even a chimp. So he basically created this place and provided medical services for patients who couldn't pay, built several duplexes, rental homes on the property, and they went to all sorts of people over the years. Property finally fell into disrepair. Buildings became overgrown with weeds. Rather than tear everything down, Salt Lake City purchased the property, plans to turn it into a public space. So there is a Hobbitville, although apparently nowadays, if you go there, you will not be murdered by gnomes, evil creatures, or magical hobbits. So that's at least good. Gonna open up the phone lines after the break, everybody. And we'll read more stories and talk some news. After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Bryan Alvarez here. After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. And producer Dom apparently does know all about these games. Right, Dom? Text message
I do,
games?
so I'm a Big Bang Theory fan, and there was one episode where Sheldon actually finds an emulator and plays Zork. Specifically Zork.
It is Zork, yes. And what happens when you get lost? What are you supposed to do?
Oh, they blindly started turning, and they said, okay, let's try to map it out. Okay, you went left, right, back, forward. Sorry, buddy, you're lost.
Yeah, you got to map it out, right? Yes. Well, listen, I was playing that Zork, and I got all the way to, I opened the mailbox, there's a leaflet in it. I tried to tear it up, it doesn't know what the word tear means. Then I try and open the door, they say the door's locked. So I said, kick the door, and then the thing goes, that's not doing any good. It's like, okay, well, I give up then. I quit. What am I supposed to do, go east? I guess I could have gone east, but I didn't. All right, we're going to continue on here. We got some emails. And I'm going to read one and then get in some news. And also, if you'd like to call us with a story, the phone lines are open. And as promised, I have made a change. So we have a phone number if you want to call, 618-762-3275. That is 618-762-3275. And you can remember that because it's 618-762-DARK. I like that? 618-762-DARK. And also, if you would like to call internationally, or if you just want to call through your computer browser, you can use the web browser line, and I made it easy. Just type in f4wonline.com/call. And you can do it that way. f4wonline.com/call. What could be easier? f4wonline.com/call. That is the international web browser line, but anyone can use it. So if you got a story, we got some time here, give us a call. All right. I wanted to read. Which one did I want to read? Because it kind of played into something that we're talking about. Is it this one here? Nah. You know what? I'm just going to go through them. And then when I get to it, I'll get to it. Oh, here it is. Okay. It's got an interesting tie-in, actually. So this is from Matthew. And he says, hey, Brian, I'm a big fan. Let me tell you about the time my town got infected with Bigfoot mania. It started in probably 2010 or something. Truthfully, don't remember the year. I'm confident I was in high school. We got a new football coach. The coach's name was Coach, I presume Pate. Could be Pate. Coach Pate turned down a good salary job at a college to come work at the high school because he fully believed Bigfoot was in the Uwharrie National Forest in Montgomery County, North Carolina, in a town of maybe 3,000 people. I know what you're thinking. Well, plenty of people believe in Bigfoot. You being one of them, he says. But he was a Bigfoot hunter. He and his team would meet regularly at a local restaurant all the time, before or after expeditions. They'd wear all their gear and this foreign-looking technology that would all look like a group of ghost hunters, basically, Ghostbusters type stuff. And then word got to Animal Planet somehow, and they came to my town to film an episode of Finding Bigfoot. I don't remember the name of it, as I'm sure there's been plenty of shows like that. But our town went crazy. Businesses started making Bigfoot apparel, hoodies, coffee, mugs, shirts, everything else you could slap a Bigfoot on. Little stands set up in the downtown area and everything. But then, like Bigfoot itself, after the week or whatever they were there, the show crew vanished into the night, and so did our town's collected interest in Bigfoot. I still have a dark brown hoodie with the Uwharrie Bigfoot logo and words slapped on it at my mother's house somewhere, I imagine. If I ever see it again, I'll send along a photo. Sometimes it feels like a fever dream. How fast it all happened and just how serious so many people took it. See, I bring that up because in my list of news articles that I want to talk about today, and we got a caller on the line we'll go to here in a moment, so caller, stand by. But there was a story that was actually in, of all places, Esquire. It's always amazing where you'll see one of these stories about Bigfoot. But Esquire had a big story, which I'm going to load up right here, about Bigfoot in, of all places, You ready for this? Washington, Oregon, the Himalayas, Canada? No. Bigfoot in London. London. Esquire magazine. Giant article. It's called Among the Believers, What If Bigfoot Were British? It talks about how a year ago, this lady saw Bigfoot. Can't stop thinking about it. She's in London. She needs answers. She's looking for them at the UK's first Bigfoot conference. So it's not just that a conference about Bigfoot went to the UK, but there are reports of Bigfoot in London. So this is completely bizarre. It says here the idea that Bigfoot is not only alive, but also alive and living in the woods, parks, and bus stations of Britain is considered crankish even by some committed cryptid enthusiasts. Mainland Britain could fit into the Pacific Northwest, which has 16 national forests 3 times over, slowly been eaten up by flyovers, new build estates, and big Tesco. So I bring this up because if you read the article here, I mean, there have been a lot of sightings of Bigfoot in and around London. And of course, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever because London is like a big city. But it points out that a lot of these sightings and such all began around the year 2015. And it points out that that was the year that Finding Bigfoot ended up going on the air. And so when you hear that, the first thing you would think is, okay, people watched Finding Bigfoot, and now they're seeing Bigfoot everywhere because they've been watching this television show. They're all making it up, et cetera, et cetera. But what the article points out is that it was in 2015, not that people started to see them, but that because the show aired, people began to be comfortable talking about having seen them. So these are not all sightings post-2015. A lot of these sightings were in the 80s, in the 90s, and of course, the idea is that if you saw Bigfoot in London in the 80s, you ain't saying anything to anybody. They're going to think you're out of your mind. But once Finding Bigfoot came out, and more people were watching the show, and people became open to the idea that, hey, maybe there is something. Now these people that had seen things came forward and started talking about how, hey, I saw something here. Now, hey, listen. The idea of a Bigfoot in London, I find that one hard to believe. It's London, obviously. But it's weird. I mean, certainly out of place, but it's weird. And it got me to think about how, in the United States, if you look at the 50 states, okay, there have been Bigfoot sightings, I believe, in 49 of the 50 states. And I've always found this really interesting because there has never been a Bigfoot sighting in Hawaii. Never. Not one time has there ever been a sighting of a Bigfoot in Hawaii. And it's always weird because you start to think, all right, hold on a second. If people are making this up, right? You're making up that you saw a Bigfoot. You went in the woods in Washington. You tell people you saw a Bigfoot. You're making it up. It's not like there aren't any forests of any sort in Hawaii. But if people are just making up these stories, well, how come they've made up these stories in like all of these states except Hawaii? No one has ever made up it doesn't even make any sense. It's weird. And then, of course, you start to think, well, maybe all of these reports, the majority of them are people who've seen a bear or whatever, and there are no bears in Hawaii. Well, then maybe you can think, okay, well, that would at least tell you that most of the people in the U.S. who report Bigfoot, they're not making it up. They saw a bear or something. They saw an actual animal that they mistook for a Bigfoot. That's why there's no Bigfoot reports in Hawaii. But it is odd that what are people mistaken for a Bigfoot in London? So anyway, apparently there have been a fair number of sightings in London over the last 30, 40 years. And of late, people are talking about them. So the article is up at Esquire if you want to go up there and check it out. And it does basically say, there are not many options here for what's going on. It's like either, there's some people that think it's an animal. That really doesn't fly in London, a giant 9-foot ape. Or, people are absolutely completely making it up. Or there's that third option, which is an interdimensional being. And honestly, hey, listen, I don't really subscribe to the whole idea of interdimensional beings, but I would say of the option 9-foot ape running around London or interdimensional being, I actually would lean towards interdimensional being because you can't have a 9-foot ape running around London. It just doesn't work. Let's go to the phones. Gardnerville, Nevada. You're on the air. Who is this and where are you calling from? Well, Nevada.
Yeah, my name is Mac, and I'm actually calling from Carson City. And I'm going to be honest, my story's kind of cheating a little bit. It's not necessarily from Carson, but it's a very famous story that was on Unsolved Mysteries back in the 90s. A woman her name was Christine Skubish. She was on her way to Carson City on Highway 50. And what happened was one day these people were driving and they saw what they believed to be a naked woman just laid out on the side of the road, and they were really confused. They didn't have time to stop or anything, but they called the cops and said, hey, there's a woman on the side of the road. I think she needs help. And when the cops went, they couldn't find any evidence of anything except, I believe, a shoe was found on the road, and they just called off the search. About 5 days later, someone noticed that there was a car right around where that person had seen the alleged body, and there was a car in a ditch. And what happened was they went and found a dead woman, which was Christine Skubish, and her 4-year-old son was with her. And they thought the son was dead, but he was very close to death, but actually clinging on to life, and they ended up being able to save his life. But the weird thing is that Christine Skubish was found completely clothed, and she died on impact. But the people who saw the woman naked on the street believed that it was Christine, and it's believed that her ghost or her soul or whatever sent out some kind of warning to let people know where her son was to hopefully get him saved. And it ended up working. But it's just one of those interesting cases, I'm not sure if you've heard of them, where sometimes a dead person lets out some kind of warning to other people to let someone know, hey, someone needs saving. I think it's a pretty interesting story, and it's a very famous case. You can look it up, and if you need any more details about it.
What was her name again?
So I'd share that. Christine Skubish.
Christine.
If you look up the Highway 50 Phantom, you can see a lot of things there about her on the Unsolved Mysteries wiki and things like that. It's a very interesting story, and there's a bunch of stories about people who have seen or heard something that they hear as a call for help or something like that, and then when they go and discover the person that they heard call for help was dead. It's really
all right.
weird.
Well, hey, Liz, we got to go to a break. Sorry, but back in a moment, everybody. After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Is here After Dark Radio. So I read up on Christine Skubish. It's Chrisistene, Skubish, Skubish. And there's a bunch of big, long stories about it. And, one of the things, when the caller was telling the story was about how the people drove by and they saw the naked woman on the side of the road. And I think he said they didn't have time to stop, and so they kept going, which... if you were very concerned that there was like a dying person on the side of the road naked, like why wouldn't you at least stop and make sure everything was okay? But the way it's explained here, it wasn't so much that they were in a hurry, but what they saw, this person laying on the side of the road, was so weird that they thought it was either an obscene practical joke or a trap to hijack their car. So they didn't trust that this thing was not, or this person wasn't trying to, steal their car. So anyway, they just went to the nearest phone booth and called the police. So that's why they didn't stop. And, apparently also, her aunt had a dream that, Christine and Nick had been in a car crash. And in her dream, she'd had several dreams about it. She saw the number 16, which turned out to be the number for the mile marker near the accident scene. So, there's, and it looks like there's about half dozen links to news stories all about this. And ended up being on Unsolved Mysteries and more. So anyway, thank you very much for that call and that story. And thank you, everybody who sent in stories today. I still got a ton of them. I will continue reading them on upcoming shows. We'll get through all of them at some point. And you can always send your stories to me, Bryan, at AfterDarkRadioshow.com. So get those emails in. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And we'll talk to you again after a while.